Is it on me, Frozen? Am I back? Am I good? Alright. Cool. It's actually working this time. As you can probably all tell, I am new to all of this. But yeah, after we got that out of the way, we're going to be painting one done. He is a lizard folk barbarian that's in my Saturday night D&D game. He's a fantastic character, and this is a digital kit bash that I put together using 4 different models, I think. But without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. First, we're going to be putting some primer on the sand. Is that a little bit better for sound there? Still pretty quiet. Let's see if we can adjust that a little bit. Don't want to be picking up my fans in the background too much. Alright, one thing I forgot to grab was a paper towel. Cool. Glad to know that it's working out a little bit better now. And of course, we get the car alarm in the background. But we're going to go ahead and start with priming the dirt that I recently glued onto this model, and then we'll move on to basing. So, just using a simple Vallejo brush-on primer for this. Making sure we get all the cracks. And getting a lot of shadows going on here. This should be a bit better. How's everybody's night going so far? Mini painting can be a little boring if I'm not talking constantly. So just kind of make sure we're getting all the little details. That's pretty much all the sand primed. I already did a just simple Krylon spray paint as my primer for the rest of the model. I had just neglected to do that after the sand was on. And then, let's see, what should we start with first? I'm thinking, let's go ahead and get some of the base coat for some of the skin tones on, which I think... Start with some Caliban green. Long week, huh? Same. Day job is as a sheet metal fabricator, and I can definitely feel you on the long week. I'm just going to be using a Citadel Caliban green as the base tone, which will be working up to a lighter and lighter highlights as we go. Add a little bit of water to this, get a little thinned down. thick right now. Sure. Once again, since we're starting with the darkest tone first, I usually try really hard to get this one into all the nooks and crannies. If you miss a spot, having a darker color as your base coat hides a few of your mistakes. Not that I ever make those while mini painting. Alright. Just isn't a step you have to be super careful. As you can see, I just got a little bit on a piece of rope here, but that's fine. I'm going to be going back and forth, different colors as I go. Lovely wife is watching the stream right next to me and is giving me very delayed reactions to the entire YouTube video. Yeah, so really this is just kind of blocking in. This is also a time that you can... Of course not. This is a time that for kind of experimenting of what you want the model to look like as you're going. In fact, if you decide that, oh, this green isn't really what I want for the model, this is the time to change it before everything's already past a point where it's an easy fix. I might actually be switching to a smaller brush here. And for anybody wondering, I don't own any really fancy brushes. It's literally just Walmart brand craft. In fact, this is what I use. You really don't need the fancy brushes unless you're really, really good. But even then, I'd really only use the really expensive brushes if I'm doing really fine detail work. Even then, I find that the cheap brushes are more than good enough. So, I always find doing the base coats of the model the most interesting part, because you're really still discovering the model and like all its little features and what you want to focus on, and kind of little things like these whistles right underneath his chin. Like, you discover those and you kind of go, start thinking about what paints you want to throw in that area and kind of how you want to make those pop, because one of the big things I see with beginning miniature painters is that they tend to focus the entire model. And what I mean by that is that they put equal amount of effort into the entire thing. And really, that's not what you want to do. You want to have all your highest effort going into the region in the face and kind of just the focal point. You want your eyes to be drawn in by higher and higher detail as you move in towards the face. And for one thing with doing these base coats is that sometimes you're going to need multiple coats in order to get like a full opacity that you want, and kind of smooth out some of these transitions. You can kind of see that there are some lighter patches and darker patches, and you just kind of want to go back over those until it looks pretty uniform. But not too much, because you're also going to be working up your layers and more. It's kind of one of those things. The more you do it, the better at it you get. Hopefully my camera angle is pretty good for you guys. So as you can see, what I was meaning earlier about like discovering the model is like all these little chains on his arm that you don't really notice just how many there are until you start, or there's like fur on the back of this axe. So that's something you want to keep in mind when you're moving forward with the paint job, and start thinking about what colors work together in order to actually bring attention to those little things. Working in. This step I like keeping my paint fairly thin because it's really difficult to get into all those cracks that later on won't really be visible, but if they're still this light gray, will be pretty visible. We're just gonna make sure we get good coverage on the skin here. So we keep painting this model. And get more comfortable. Alright. Sometimes you just gotta rotate the model to get some of these spots. Almost there with these base coat for the skin. And again, to reiterate, you don't have to be super careful at this step. Just get more precise as you go along. So you can see I'm kind of covering up some of these chains. Kind of just not caring too much at this point because I know I'm going to be coming back over them. Cover up the miniature with the webcam. How's it going, Morgan? Looks like you've got a long week as well. Just alright. Looks like we're pretty good on the skin tone here. Since he's a lizard folk, should I say scale tone? I don't know. What do you guys think? Rinse the brush out, switch colors. Let's see. I have switch brushes here. A little bit thicker but finer point because I want a thick fuller and body to the brush, but I want a sharp tip. These really thin brushes for miniatures, I don't suggest.
We are going to witness the
Pilsner, huh? Wait. Double hopped. Got it. You know, I haven't been there yet. So let's see. His character art. We got striped pants. I think I'll go ahead and do that. Okay, let's grab some gray. No. Let's go with that black and gray. There you are. Dawnstone. Just with my metallics. Alright. This entire time I was just expecting you to be under your usual username, Nick. Well, I'll use scale tone moving forward. It's true. You usually never know. Alright. Let's do just a gray. Well, it's already gray. So let's do another gray as the base tone. And we will be using Citadel Dawnstone for this. Let's go a little more. Usually when you're thinning your paint, you want to look for something just a little bit thicker than like milk. And that makes sense. Different genres of login. What constitutes a different genre of login? I'm not liking this brush too much. Now, if you keep noticing that I'm looking at my brush, do not follow my example. This is a terrible habit. This paint is rated as non-toxic, but I have accidentally done that when the paint was not rated non-toxic. So, let's just be careful. I guess missed a little skin tone there, but we can back to it. Gotcha. So basically, you have a different method of usernames for gaming, and then there's tabletop, and then actual purchasing. Yeah, it was actually, I have it right here. The paint was this Tamiya flat aluminum. And let me tell you, it tasted terrible. Just disgusting. I am far too used to these water-based acrylics, and that was I don't know what base it was, but it was very terrible. Alright, so these pants are pretty tucked away. should I say shorts. So they're going to be a little bit more difficult, but we're also not focusing super high detail on the pants because of their distance from the face. Alright. And I get it. Brush behind this axe here. You know, I've always thought that they should be like Sour Patch Kid flavored or Starburst, maybe something like that. Like pink should just be raspberry, right? Which, does that make like an electric blue raspberry? Bit of skin tone again because I missed it. Probably a carcinogen. Alright. You know, I almost bought Radium Girls recently. I saw it, I think, as an Amazon ad. But, I decided against it. Alright. So, pants have their little gray base tone. I'm thinking we can go ahead and move on to... Oh, actually finishing skin tone here. What was Radium Girls about? I mean, Rome had lead water pipes, so there's always weird stuff when it comes to water. Alright, let's go ahead and get some bone figured out. I like basing my bone before I actually do a bone color with red. Or like a kind of red-brown. Didn't old makeup also have like mercury in it? Lots of lead too, since they have to specify it's lead-free now. Again, do not lick your brushes. Just don't do it. Do as I say, not as I do. Alright. A nice red. Blocking it out. It's a good way to think about how you're doing this is like if you're blocking out your colors, you're kind of figuring out what works, what doesn't. So I think that's enough red. Well, since you're here, Nick, what do you want for the vest here? Color do you want? So thinking like bronze, silver for the shoulder, the pauldron, and for your belt, I was gonna go off of a standard storm giant. Or not storm giant. Just a Delta giant strength. So I can move on to doing some browns for pouches. I'll figure that out. Spin it. Okay. Nice. Chocolatey brown. Belt there. I will go ahead and do the bronze and silver for the pauldron. Alright, so we're also going to do some dark spatter. Oak Brown by Reaper. So I know this is no label, but this is Oak Brown by Army Painter, not Reaper. By these people. Rich dark brown that really sets a nice wood tone, which is what we're moving on to. Sailing canvas. All right. Probably gonna go with a bone shade for that. Do you like blood on the hand? Or you stick a little more PG?
It is the best instrument of its kind in the world.
Okay, so like a textured heavy cloth. For something this size, it usually takes me about 2.5 hours. Most of my commission work for D&D models takes me about 2.5 hours. Yeah. Honestly, blood is on brand. All right. For anybody who saw the Lincoln Mini I painted for Lincoln, that took me roughly 13 hours to paint, but that was a 6-inch tall model. Honestly, it can vary though, depending on my amount of the effort I put in. The Lincoln Mini is the longest time I've spent on a Mini, I think, unless I count Warhammer 40k vehicles, and then one of the tanks that I did for OT, I think was about 16. Yeah, I think that's the longest. I think that's the longest I've done. Obviously, you can spend. I've heard of people spending. Thank you. It was a labor of love. I've seen people spend hundreds of hours on models, and it was insane. But those are award-winning guys that at conventions and that sort of thing. I've never seen a or triple-digit hour paint job in person. But it just seems absurd to me. It's white. Yeah, well, with the weather right now, it's not surprising that we're getting a lot of latency. For the white, I don't actually use model paint. I use Liquitex Heavy Body because I have never gotten a good white from a model brand, ever. We're going to go ahead and base coat the bottle in white, even though I'm planning on having it being a green bottle. And I'll have a little trick for that in a second. That makes sense. Alright. There's a little bit of rope there, but we're gonna ignore that. So, I have a little trick for painting glass on models, which is base coating white and then using Citadel contrast paint and painting over the white with the basically toned heavy body wash. And it creates a fantastic glass facsimile. Alright, so waiting on the oak to dry a little bit. Let's go ahead and work on some metallics. I'm gonna use some Citadel Brass Scorpion. And for anyone who has mini painted before or is semi-aware of model paint companies, I've actually rebottled all of my paint because I hate these bottles that Citadel paint comes in. They suck because they're just open top and I can't really control how much I have out on my palette at a time. So I spent like $15 on Amazon and got like 150 pack of these small dropper bottles. And let's, yeah, I think this is a good choice. There. So, I made a post on my Instagram recently about characters that everybody's been waiting to play, like the perfect campaign. So I'm curious about you guys, like what are some characters that you've had in your back pocket forever and are now waiting for the perfect campaign to play in, Sailor Scouts excluded? base coat these. And some bronze, copper. Yeah.
It's out of my hand,
Yeah.
but I'm still in control. It's
For the glues on your armor, I'm assuming for finding good like craft brands for that.
you can never take away the power of my
That is an amazing theme for a bee-themed wizard. Would you take like a level of Swarmkeeper so you could have bees? What was I just doing?
It's out of my hand, but I'm still in control. It's out of my hand.
Alright. Some of these smoke base coats are pretty good as they are. Rebottling. Gotcha. How long is like the what's the word I'm looking for here? Latency for me responding to something you guys say in chat. Like what's the average response time when you say? I was just curious. That sounds terrifying, Nick. A swarm of burning bees as fireball? That sounds absolutely terrifying. And I can already hear the angry buzzing. Alright, let's... I think for this old cloth texture, we're gonna go with some Morghast bone from Citadel once again. Huh, good. I've known some streamers that have a almost 40-second delay. 30 seconds? Okay, so it's about average. Alright, that's very thick. Okay. So we're gonna go ahead and start throwing down some paint. Oh my god, meteor swarm with bees. That sounds insane. Now, would they be like bees or would they be like murder hornets? Because they kind of seem along the same vein. And I did not miss the thing about the idiot little kobold warlock. That also sounds like a super fun character. Stinging cloud. Oh man, I'm thinking if I get some special what's the word I'm looking for? Emojis or badges, icons, that sort of thing, should be the inspiration and de-inspiration tokens, based entirely on how many puns you make. Continuing to work on some base coats here. This is the longest part of any miniature project. So you get all the foundation you're building on. I'd say it's usually on a 2.5 hour mini. Usually accounts for about an hour and 45 minutes of my time. massive bumblebees. I think there's some pretty massive bumblebees or bees in South America that aren't like brutal hornets. What is this playlist doing?
Should I be scared? The feeling's so different now. You got me floating here.
Try a little bit just to not get brush lines.
Oh, but when the wind blows, will I tumble or sail away?
We're gonna go ahead
Or
and
would you
mix this
have
with
me
a
stay?
little white.
And
Taking a little bit of the bone color and mixing it into a little bit of the titanium white to get this parchment here. So I don't want it quite as dark as the shirt. Oh, you're talking elephant-sized bees. Alright, so you're just summoning things from the bee dimension? Rick and Morty style? Oh my god, that's a disturbing thought, Martin. Or not Martin, Stephanie. Good lord. Bees cleaning me just sounds like nightmare material. So is it like your spell book is just like a beehive that you carry around? And you're just talking to the bees?
what if you're everything I need? A fire in my heart, the air I breathe.
You just pull out one of the frames when you're memorizing your spells for the day?
By my side.
I mean, if you really want the bees to do it, you go... One, we all know that bees dance as their major form of communication. So... you have a honeycomb, Liam is hot. Morgan, no. No. No, not the movie script. That movie was... Ugh. I saw that in theaters. And even at like, and I'm dating myself here, I was like, I want to say middle school when that came out. I saw it in theaters. And even then I was like, this is horrifying and what the fuck?
Don't care, I just might pack my bags and take off tonight.
Oh, I always did love the scene when his best friend was in the fucking hospital. It had a freaking margarita sword.
No need to put that on me. Just need some fresh
Well, that's a cool idea, Nick. Have it kind of a portal to another realm as you reach into a pocket. It's just they're pocket dimensions.
Easy to see if I'm winning or losing when all eyes find me.
Count yourself lucky, Nick, for never seeing that movie, because holy crap.
I'm good with changing my pocket.
Okay.
My way ain't perfect. It's mine, so that seems worth it, right?
Alright, we're gonna go ahead and throw some bone color on this.
Don't need that pressure from ya. No need to put that on me.
Should be kind of thin, because we want the red to come through a little bit. Have it be a little bit of a, not necessarily old bone, it's almost like it's still a little too fresh.
Easy to see if I'm winning or losing when all eyes find me.
we're pretty far along already, and I've been live for, what, 45 minutes? Not bad. Pretty difficult places to reach here. We'll manage.
Don't need that pressure from you. No need to put that on me. Just need some fresh air.
Make sure everything's still in frame. So if you see me rinsing my brush a lot, even if I'm not changing color, it's actually because I'm rehydrating the brush. So if I go too long, I start getting like pebbled paint from the paint that dried on my brush. I'm going too long. So that's why I do that. That's how you get some kind of gloopy models that you see on the internet. Or if I ever feeling brave enough to post the first model I ever painted. Alright, just kind of throwing some more layers on. Thank you. I'm very proud of how this turned out for the bashing. It really... The models really lent themselves to each other. It was pretty amazing. And I also just love the idea of a fat lizard folk. Yeah, it's dry brushes. If it's like kind of pebbly, I can't really think of a better way to describe it. But if it's like blobs of paint, that's from not thinning your paint correctly. As you can see, actually, I don't know if this will pick up too well on the camera. These are the same paint colors. But this one was undercoated with red, and this was just over gray. You can actually tell the difference between the two shades right here. So when I actually throw the wash on, it's actually going to be fairly different, especially if I throw different colored washes on the two, which I think I might do. And we're going to mix a little bit of the red with some brown to create a nice burgundy, maroon, and do this fur because I want something a little more visually interesting than brown fur. And red and green go together really well. Okay. There's no good way to get these. I think we're just going to be doing some of the smaller details, so we've got enough of the large colors blocked in. So actually, I've got way too much tan going on here. So I think for the cord around his neck, I might actually mix up dark brown. Get a little bit of black on my palette. Placed my black. Of course, it's right in front, you know, where most things are. How easy is it to learn paint layering? It does depend a little bit on brand. Some paints do it better. For instance, Citadel is pretty good for layering because they have a higher pigment count. Stuff like Army Painter is not so good. I found that they are pretty good consistency right off the bat, and if you water them down for good layering, you start losing pigmentation, so it's not a great layering color. I wouldn't say it's too difficult. I think it's just mostly practice. I think it's moving on up from just learning what colors layer well together, because if you layer certain like undertoned colors, like even if you mixed a darker green with a lighter green, like if you said you did the Caliban green with, I know I just said Army Painter isn't great for this, but for in terms of analogy, I'm going to use it. This is like a pale, desaturated green. This is a very vibrant, very saturated green. If you mix these together, you're going to get a muted, kind of almost distractingly off to your eye color, and that's kind of the most important thing of layering you want to keep in mind, is even if you're layering the same color that's different shades together, you could get the wrong sort of surface finish from it because it's either saturated or desaturated. And thank you for the sub, Stephanie. Just sub. It's a good dark brown. And then I'd even say, for basic color rules, yes, I would suggest getting a color wheel if you're planning on doing this. And when you're thinking of complementary colors or that sort of thing, you want to look on opposite ends of the color spectrum. Those are the ones, or at least when you're doing a paint scheme, you want all of your colors to be complementary, and that means, or contrasted, is going to be opposite ends of the color wheel. And then there's secondary complementary colors, and those are kind of blends. It's like, I don't know how to explain this. I will post a good video about this when I get the chance. It's a big topic, but generally it's pretty simple. It's more about just sit down with some colors and start mixing them together and see which ones you like after sitting there for a little bit. That's how I learned, until I figured out that there's actually people posting videos about it on YouTube, and then started doing that. Because the reason I got into mini painting is I saw at a game store I was playing D&D at about 6 years ago, that there's this guy with fantastic painted models every week, and I was sitting there with my unpainted miniature of my hunter ranger named Florence, and just was like, I hate not having this painted. This guy is showing up every week with this fantastic looking model, and I want that. And so I just bought the Reaper Learn to Paint kit that came with a few models, and bought a few goblins because my plan was to run a game with the starter set. And I repainted the goblins a few times. I kept my first goblin I ever painted. It's the first mini I ever painted. And I kept the majority of the models as they were the first time I painted them, because I was told that that was something I was gonna want to keep. And he was right. I ended up being very thankful that I never repainted my first model, and so that I could have a kind of journey to look back on. We're just doing some of the finer detail work right now by rimming this pauldron and some Land Belcher by Citadel. It's kind of my go-to steel. And yeah, color theory is super weird. It's one of those ones that's not easily explained either. In fact, it's one of the things I'm still learning about, because eventually I want to start painting metals with non-metallic paint, with just grays, blacks, browns, and that sort of thing. And you have to have an understanding of color theory in order to do that. Because a lot of it goes into, also when you're mixing paint and layering, you want to think about what paints will layer well together to create the texture you're looking for. Because sometimes you want that desaturated color if you're doing like leather or something like that. It's really kind of all dependent on miniature painting. There's a lot of forgiveness based on the size of the thing you're painting. But yeah, hope that answered part of your question at least. Alright, just throw another coat on here. Let's reach full opacity. I would say, I say they're hard in different ways as far as size is concerned. The Lincoln Mini, I would say, is one of the hardest models I've had to paint, but I think it was because it was the longest. But there's also been models that had such a hot, any Games Workshop Space Marine model for the Chaos Legions has so many details that you have to fill that it's honestly gets so tedious on the small. But in all honesty, I prefer that than spending 2 hours blending the skin tones on a large model. Yeah, I think they're just hard in different ways. Because it really just depends on the model. I would say that it's more about scale. Something like Lincoln, that's a model that was just blown up. But if you're talking a model that was designed to be large but is in the small scale universe, it's about the same as painting a small model. Like, for instance, if I was to paint this guy, he's a pretty big model compared to one done here. And my camera does not know who to focus on. This one wouldn't be too bad because it's designed to fit within this world. So it's all the detail work is similar. Yeah. Each model is also unique. I have found that the most difficult models I've had to paint are commissions where somebody was far too specific on what they wanted. And so I felt kind of trapped by their descriptions, or kind of, what's the word I'm looking for? There wasn't a lot of creativity involved.
Sometimes I want to run away. To find good time.
Doing my tip.
To find all my old friends.
Some of my details. And a tip for anybody that wants to get into painting is when you're doing high detail models like this, or like the filigree on his belt, you want to use the side of your brush, not the actual like tip, like going in. You want to, so say I was going to be doing this edge. If I did this, it gets sloppy really quick, as you can see. But if I was to hold it like this, and then use the side of my brush, way more controlled, in fact. And that's the difference between the two. It's far more controlled if I'm using the side of my brush than if I'm using the tip of my brush.
I can see this city through my watered eyes, lets me know that I'm still
For instance, maybe using the side of my brush to do some of this filigree work so I don't have any chance of going back over any of the bronze I spent time doing. I appreciate that method of commission, Nick. I really do. And I've noticed that when or the one time I've commissioned artwork for myself, I was definitely like, well, this is kind of what I want. This is the kind of general themes. These are the things I'm very specific on. Like, this is what it needs to look like. But everything else, I know things can get busy, and what's imagined in your head is often not what looks good on paper. That giving the artist some leeway and kind of like, well, what looks good to you can really help. But there's also the double-edged sword of not giving enough detail. Though I'd say that you really do strike a happy balance. Having now done 2 minis for you, I'll do it in a second. So, this is the point when I start getting a little bit more careful. Because now I've got enough paint on the model that going back over to fix the skin tone like I am now from getting metallics on the belt, well, I want to fix the skin tone without messing up the belt I just did. Now I have to get a little bit more careful, and it becomes the juggling act of, am I doing too much fixing, am I doing too little? Alright, so we've got that. I don't think it's popping enough, so we're actually going to change it a little bit. Change the rope.
No more patience when I'm feeling low. I'm vacation, my mind wants to go. Overthinking when I'm all alone. Out of focus from all the unknown. Yeah, you check for my vitals. Think I need revival.
That. Use a little bit of the gray with the bone to create just a kind of off bone color. Do some of the texture work on the shirt. Just take a little bit of paint on your brush, just a little. I don't think my camera's gonna pick this up too well, but in person it'll have a very subtle effect of creating texture on the model. This isn't the time you really want to go hard on all the detail work, because we're going to be applying a wash, and that has a tendency to erase a lot of the work you put in. If you go too hard on the details, you want to do all your highlights and such after doing your wash. Otherwise, you're going to lose most of it. Silver on these. thinking I'm gonna do a nice, like, darker gray for the hat. I'm gonna use Ashen Gray from Citadel for that. I actually do like having art references for when I'm doing the models. But if you've had art of your character done before, or like Danny likes doing, is creating an entire Pinterest board. Which that, I find that those sorts of things help a lot. Because even if I don't use all the references, it gives me an idea of the character that can help inform me of painting choices. Now, that being said, don't flood sources. I've had people send me multi-minute long videos of their cats for their familiar. That was not useful.
Way too many faces in the crowd, but I think that I see one too many days got me changing up the way that I need you. Now we're both at it for acting like it's not hard, trying to feel something different. Talk to somebody new, kinda wish it was you, kinda numb to the feeling. Now that you're gone, they say time should heal, but
Yeah, it wasn't great.
couple months and I can't see
I would prefer not to have that many. For if you want to send me a cat video, it's fine. It's just don't send me like 5 minutes. Hey, I love cats. I had a lot of cats growing up. I grew up on a farm. And my favorite cat, and I feel no shame in admitting that this was my favorite cat, was named Reese's Pieces. And it was a female orange tabby, not tabby, calico? And she was fantastic. She was a stray that showed up on our property one day. She was great. I love Reese's. She's actually still alive. Something like 11 years later. My mom had to give her up when she moved to Texas. And a wonderful couple in Canyon Lake adopted her, which were my mom's friends. It wasn't like a stranger's thing. She's now living on a lake, living her best life. Fortunately, I am allergic to cats. But it's also like saying I'm allergic to I'm not sure how I feel about this boy. But we're gonna keep going. So we're doing a little bit of a striped pattern on the shorts here. Yeah, let's tuck it in. In order to make something read as actually striped, you kind of have to actually follow the contours of the pants as we go. So it's not going to be an actually straight line. Your brain, oh, that's what I'm talking about, pebbling. Waited too long to throw water back in my brush. It's paint dried, and now I gotta get that off. Okay, there you go. Off you go, and let's clean it up a little bit. dehydrated brush. And there we go. Let's go ahead and put another one here. Kind of a very... Really, there's not a lot of rules to this. It's more about what looks good. I say that. I think of at least 6 different rules. I think we've got enough stripes on there to be a little bit more confident about the choices. Now, I follow a couple mini painters, and they have a general rule. There is a time on every model where it does not look great. It doesn't look bad, but it doesn't look good. We are just about that stage. But we're gonna keep going, because it always ends up coming together. Sure, keep things in frame. Just gonna make sure everything's a little cleaned up. Always using the edge of the brush on this sort of line work, edges, that sort of thing. So it can very easily get out of control. Alright. I think the chains on the arm should be bronze. I think that will just pop. Got a little bit on the skin. That's no problem though. Not following my own advice of using the side of the brush. That's fine. You can always fix it. I have a favorite part of the painting brush process. I think it depends. I think in general, when I'm doing a model like this, it's all the highlighting work after I throw the wash on. I think that's generally my favorite. If I'm doing like a really large, like volume of flat area, I really enjoy doing all the like really creamy blends on that. But I think in general, I think it's highlights. It's really when you can make the model go from it's good to oh wow, that's good. I think the most tedious part of a model is making sure that you have all your surfaces covered, that you don't have any of the unpainted gray spots. You know what? I'm gonna actually change my answer to that. My favorite part doing a model is the base. I love doing bases. That is my favorite part. I can take a meh model and make it a great model. Nothing wrong with black bases or simple bases or anything like that. I know a lot of people that prefer them because it fits into every environment. But I feel like when you're painting a model, you're telling a story. And part of that character story is where they're from. And I often like making their bases less about where they are and more about where they're from. Or in the cases of some commissions, people want specific moments that made them decide they wanted a miniature and they wanted that as their model. I remember painting in the Raxian campaign, Murphy. He wanted a specific moment in his character arc as his base, which was standing on a beach in an RP moment. I don't think a lot of mini painters approach models that way. I think if they're painting like a Warhammer army or something like that, it's often about like what looks coolest or kind of has quote unquote flavor to the models and kind of I guess a little bit to the story, but it's not a personal thing. It's something they're doing for over 100 models most of the time. I know for a lot of my models, I'll go off of backstory, personally. Or, for instance, when I painted Errol for the Raxian campaign, I felt like Warpstone was an important part of the story, and so I did a Warpstone base, which was an OSL effect of glowing rocks on his base that affected the lighting of the model, and where I put the highlights and that sort of thing. On his legs. Well, for the bases here, I use sand for the bases with some super glue and that sort of thing. I've used dry pigments, which were basically dust. For other mediums, I did snow with baking powder and PVA glue once. I think that was the most out of the paint I've done. Though, if we go back to like official role-playing system, Kieran, to when I was in like middle school and just wanted to hang out with friends, I created miniatures out of pipe cleaners. Figured out a way that you could use a single pipe cleaner and create consistent sized models of humans. And then I proceeded to use margarita skewers or like olive skewers as swords and that sort of thing. I wish I had pictures of that, but they were lost on the family computer at one point. But I had I took the canisters for protein, like protein powder, and created ships that I had entire pipe cleaner crews on them. I set them up in full-on displays in the family craft room. And I used a lot of popsicle sticks, and I even made my own twine out of horsehair for the ship's rigging. Though I never did that again because I am allergic to horses too. One of my mom's biggest things when I was growing up was making sure that there are plenty of craft supplies. For anybody who doesn't know, I was homeschooled, and we were part of a charter school, and part of being a charter school is that each kid got a certain allowance for buying materials and that sort of thing. And my mom often used the majority of our stipend to buy art supplies. That was always very important to her. And pretty much all of her kids turned out pretty artistic. My older sister's fantastic at water painting, or watercolors. And I have another sister who's fantastic at oil painting. My younger sister is a hairstylist now, like my mom. Yeah, pretty much all my siblings are pretty artistic. And my dad was actually a pretty great painter and sculptor, though he very rarely shared those skills off. One year, I wish I had a picture of it, at work they had a Christmas stocking painting contest. Using a plastic knife, created a Van Gogh style like Christmas scene on a stocking, and it hung in a frame every Christmas because it was that cool. So we're getting pretty close here on base coats. Honestly, I'm mostly checking to see if I missed any spots, which I did. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and move on to that little trick for making things look like glass bottles specifically. I'm going to be using some orc flesh contrast paint from Citadel. This is basically a heavy pigment wash. That's the best way I would describe that. You're actually going to water it down a fair amount, and you're going to put it over the white part of the bottle that you highlighted earlier. Because it's like a wash, it goes to the recesses and stays away from the high spots. And what you end up doing is a very easy and effective glass bottle finish. All the paint. It's heavier in the thick areas and lighter in the bubbled out areas. I think I'm actually going to take a little bit of black. Just do a little bit of scribble work on the label to make it look like something's written on it. Thinking, when I'm staring at this arm, it seems a little too, what's the word I'm looking for? A little too monotone. So I'm going to throw a little bit of green paint on some of the ridges of the arm to make it look like there's a vine climbing around. So it looks like there's already something that looks like a vine here. So I'm going to go ahead and start picking it out with the side of my brush. Adding a little bit of visual interest to this area of the mini. As, like I mentioned early on in the stream, you want the areas closest to the face to have the most detail and the highest highlights. So I'm going to take the palm, highlight that little circle in there, just kind of keep going over and seeing spots that you're not really sure about. Maybe it just needs a little bit of extra something. I think I'm going to get this to the point of the wash and out for a little bit and then call it a night. And the next stream, which I think this might become a regular thing, I will pick it up and finish all the highlighting work. So it is getting a little late. We are almost there. Yeah, we're gonna go ahead and pick out that detail as well. Yeah. So yeah, that was an easy way to make the arm pop just a little bit. I use the same tone as the skin tone, and it actually creates a more cohesive color scheme for the entire model. So just double checking, making sure most of my lines are pretty clean. Going back over this, I think I'm going to go ahead and throw some color onto the base. Some browns. Because I think if I'm going off of backstory, it's a pretty rich jungle environment. So I'm going to have a kind of splotchy, inconsistent ground coverage. Skin tone. Let's go with some Baylor Brown. This is Baylor Brown by Citadel. Let's go a little bit more mixed. Not so crazy of a exchange. There we go. We are going to be going back over this with a dry brush, so it's not super important that I get everything, because there's also black and gray rocks on the ground, so I don't have to be super careful about if getting all of it. It actually creates a bit more visual interest and doesn't make it look so consistent, because that's really the biggest issue when I see bases or a model, is that it's too perfect. Life isn't perfect, and neither should your model. Little bit of inconsistency actually helps sell it. At least that's what I tell myself. Alright, let's use a little bit of this Dawnstone and pick out some of the rocks here on the base. You can pop a little bit. He has been through a lot. I mean, there's a reason why his arm is made out of wood. And we're gonna go some different colored grays for the rocks, just to keep it a little interesting. Keep it so consistent. You know what, we're also just gonna put a little bit of gray on some of these. One of my biggest inspirations, and especially as I'm talking to all of you and kind of walking through this, is Bob Ross, and I think I can confidently say sometimes there's just little happy accidents when you're painting. And that is sometimes when you get paint where you weren't supposed to get paint. But it works. I'm going to keep it there and actually increase the volume, and makes it look like there's a little bit more consistency in the world. Yeah. I'm going to keep it like that. I'm going to go ahead and do these claws a bone color. saltwater crocodiles. What color are their claws? Well, they're always in mud, so you can't tell. I'm just gonna stick with the bone color. Yeah, rest in peace, Bob Ross, for sure. Truly a man who changed a lot of lives. Mine, for certain. Looks like my paint has dried out a little bit. So I'm just gonna add a little bit of water, rehydrate it. Yeah, that's about the consistency I'm looking for. All right, I think I have a couple things to touch up. Maybe do a little pre-blending. I don't want this so dark around his face, so we're actually going to take, I think, a little bit of this forest. Throw that on my palette. Quite difference in paint tone. I'm going to mix those together to create a mid-tone. Something. Going to go back over some of the higher areas of the chest. Just a little bit of highlight. Face. So we want to have the dark colors that we put on earlier do a lot of the work for our shadows, but in order for those to do the work, you have to kind of go back over it with a lighter tone to really make those highlights pop. There we are. Just lightening things up. Kind of doing some cleanup here and there. Alright, let's increase the light value a little bit by adding more of that lighter green. Back over it, hitting smaller and smaller surface areas so you actually see some of those mid-tones you threw on earlier. It's really about just kind of building these highlights over time, because if you go too high contrast in your highlights, you tend to get something that looks a little bit more metallic, because when you're doing a non-metallic paint job, you want things to have a lot of high contrast in order for it to actually look like metal. Thank you, and have a good night. I think we're pretty close to applying a wash, because if I do too much more, it's just going to be lost after that. I think I'm going to do one more highlight in the chest area. Yeah, let's add some to the rolls of fat on the back as well. chunky boy. Alright, I think what I've got left to do before the wash and signing off is to do a little bit of work on his eyes. We'll call it good. I think, following in the vein of crocodile art and what I'm seeing on my visual references for Crocs, a nice yellow might be good for the eye. Not really focus too much on iris, mainly because this model doesn't really have fine detail eye work, so I'm going to have to fill it a lot on my own. So, I'm going to adjust the camera because I'm starting to lean more and more left. Let's get yellow. That's what I'm thinking. Okay. Let's just, whenever you're doing a yellow, it's always pretty difficult to actually get a saturated yellow, something that actually reads as yellow instead of like orange or a badly painted yellow. So it's always good to start with the white and then go over it with your yellow, because yellow is one of those tones that's very dependent on the color you start with. And I'm always a little sloppy when I'm doing eyes, mainly because I know I can come back over with the skin tone and fix any mistakes I made, because eyes are hard, as any mini painter will tell you. I'm not in frame. So a nice thing with acrylic paint is that if you don't have any paint on your brush and you have water, you can actually pull off paint before it's dry without leaving too much residue on the surface. I'll just try my brush. Alright, I think it's just a little bit of cleanup here. Making sure you get the right shape to the eye. I'd say that's pretty good. I'm gonna fix the other eye a little bit. Not quite as clean. A little bit of shaky hands. Always helps the painting process. There we go. A little bit of cleanup. Add that highlight back. Because there seems to be a lack of texture here, going to paint in some nostrils. Cool. And I think we are pretty much there for the wash. You gotta do that. So I mentioned earlier I was going to do different colored washes. Oh, sleeve caught. So I'm actually going to be using a black wash for the majority of the miniature. And then for the metallics and bone, I'm going to use a brown. Because brown makes copper and gold specifically actually look like that metal. I just realized I forgot to paint his teeth. Let me go ahead. Add a few of those in. There. All right, let's do some washes. So I always use crap, or I was about to say crap here. These brushes have served their purpose. They're well-loved brushes. And we're going to go ahead and do the brown first. Really load that brush up. Just be a little careful about where you get it, especially if you're using two different washes on a project. I'm actually going to do it on the claws as well. When I first started painting, I didn't know about washes, and I was like, why am I so bad at this? Turns out, washes do something called recessed shading, which professional, like award-winning painters can do just by using paint and like inks. But for the beginner painter, or even somebody who has decided that they don't want to spend 1,000 hours painting every model, can use to great effect. So we're just going to go over all the metallics with this brown. Metallics. Make sure you switch to a larger brush. It's always good before you start washing to make sure your brush is wet. Now we're just gonna go over this black. Before it's dry, we're going to make sure that we didn't overwash any areas, because that would not be good. So if you have too much wash sitting on a high surface, or even just too much in a recessed surface, it can kind of take away from the rest of the paint job. It becomes distracting, and it just doesn't look good. right here, this is way too much. So I would wipe off my brush and just suck it off. A little bit here, a little bit here. A little bit here. Oh, cool, that was caught on stream. I just dumped half my bottle of wash. It's a good thing I have a paper towel right here. That is the first time I've done that. Thank you. Let's clean it up before we continue on. I've heard talk for years in the mini painting community that this is a rite of passage, so apparently I'm now a mini painter. F indeed. So, if you notice, I'm actually going heavier on the wash the lower down I get on the model, and I'm going to reiterate that the closer you get to the face area and all that, the lighter you want to be. You have to bring all the focus, I'm not afraid, all the focus towards the face. Everything else is secondary and, thanks, really, everything else is just a frame to the portrait, which is the face. Alright. Being kind of careful not to hit the bottle I just did, because you can very easily ruin the glass effect you got by throwing wash over that part of the model. So, always a little bit more careful. And let's get some in the mouth. That's pretty good. Come on. Get in there. All right. So it looks like a lot of wash right now. When it dries, it actually won't be so much. But it usually takes about half hour to 40 minutes for the wash to dry. Usually at the time, if I'm like working on a Friday on commissions, I'll go and have lunch or dinner and then come back and sit down. But with that, actually I'm gonna pull the wash back up because I'm not done. Just do a little bit more here. Just making sure we get all the little nooks and crannies. It's actually what does the most for hiding any of the little mistakes you had in these small areas. Really helps clean up the model. Alright. I think I'm going to call that good for the basically first half of painting the miniature. Made quite a bit of progress tonight. So, I think I'm going to go ahead and call it a night. We'll finish this guy up next time. Alright guys, I will talk to you next time.